There's a moment most people don't talk about. It usually happens late at night. You're sitting alone. Your phone is face down. The house is quiet. And for a few seconds, you let yourself think honestly about money. Not what you asterisk earn asterisk. Not what you asterisk show asterisk. But what you actually asterisk have asterisk. And that's when the discomfort shows up. Because on paper, you're doing fine. You have a job. You pay your bills. You're not starving. Maybe you even get the occasional raise. But deep down, there's this quiet fear you don't like to name. If I stopped working for a few months, I'd be in trouble. If something went wrong, I'm not really protected. I've been busy for years, but I don't feel any safer. That if they could just earn more, everything would finally click. That's the lie. The truth is far more uncomfortable. Most people will earn a lot of money over their lifetime and still never feel secure, still feel fragile, still feel one bad month away from panic. Not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, not because they didn't try, but because they never crossed one invisible line. A line that changes how money behaves in your life. That line is your first 100,000. And here's the part nobody tells you. It's supposed to feel hard. It's supposed to feel slow. It's supposed to feel unfair. Because the rules before that number are completely different from the rules after it. Before that point, money feels like water running through your hands. You earn it, it disappears. You save a little, something comes up. You try again, and life resets you back to zero. After that point, money starts to feel heavy, stable, like it wants to stay. But most people never experience that shift. They don't fail because they don't work hard. They fail because they misunderstand the game they're playing. They think wealth is about income. They think it's about looking successful. They think it's about keeping up. So they upgrade their lives in tiny, invisible ways. A little nicer place. A little nicer car. A few more comforts to make the grind feel worth it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing reckless. Just enough to make progress impossible. And years later, they look back confused. How did I work this long and still feel stuck? Why does it feel like I'm always starting over? Why does everyone else look ahead while I'm just surviving? This isn't a motivation problem. It's not a discipline problem. It's a sequencing problem. Most people try to enjoy the rewards before they build the base. They try to live like someone who already won, while still playing the hardest part of the game. And the hardest part is the beginning. The first 100,000 isn't hard because the math is complex. It's hard because it asks you to do something that feels socially backward. It asks you to delay gratification in a world designed to punish patience. It asks you to look unimpressive while quietly building strength. It asks you to say no when everyone else is saying yes. And it asks you to do this for years, with very little visible progress. That's why most people quit. Not loudly. Not dramatically. They just stop prioritizing it. They tell themselves they'll focus on saving later. They'll invest once things calm down. They'll get serious once they feel more stable. But life never calms down, and later keeps moving. So they stay busy. They stay stressed. They stay dependent on the next paycheck. And eventually, that becomes normal. This video isn't about hustling harder. It's not about extreme frugality or financial tricks. It's not about turning you into someone you're not. It's about understanding why the first 100,000 feels so heavy, and why the people who reach it almost never go back. Because once you cross that line, money stops being something you chase. It becomes something that supports you. You stop feeling like every decision is fragile. You stop panicking at small setbacks. You stop needing money to perform confidence for you. You start sleeping differently, thinking differently, choosing differently, not because you're rich, but because you're no longer exposed. Most people never experience that shift, not because they couldn't, but because no one explained what they were actually building toward. They were told to save more. They were told to invest early. They were told to be responsible, but they were never told why the beginning feels so discouraging, or why progress feels invisible. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and still not moving forward, if you've ever wondered why money feels exhausting instead of empowering, if you've ever suspected that the system isn't broken, but the order of operations is. Then this is for you. Because once you understand what's actually happening, the confusion lifts, and the path becomes painfully clear. Let's talk about what this actually feels like in real life. Not the theory, not the spreadsheets, just the day-to-day experience most people quietly live with. You wake up, go to work, do what's expected of you. You handle responsibilities. You're not reckless with money, but somehow money still feels tight. Not in a dramatic way. Not can't pay rent tight. More like, I need to check my account before saying yes. I hope nothing unexpected happens this month. I can't really afford to relax. It's a constant low-level tension. You don't talk about it because everyone else seems fine. They're going on trips, upgrading things, living life. So you assume the problem must be you. Maybe you didn't choose the right career. Maybe you started too late. Maybe you're just bad with money. But when you zoom out, something strange appears. You've been earning for years, sometimes more than you ever imagined when you were younger. Yet the feeling hasn't changed. A raise comes in and for a moment, there's relief. Breathing room. You feel lighter. Then a few months pass. Life expands to fill the space. The new normal sets in. The relief fades. And the same background stress quietly returns. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the system you're operating inside rewards spending and punishes restraint. Think about how money moves through your life. It arrives, and almost immediately it's assigned a job, rent, utilities, transportation, food, subscriptions you barely remember signing up for. By the time you're done paying for being functional, what's left feels too small to matter. So you tell yourself it's not worth stressing over yet. You'll save more seriously later. Except later keeps getting pushed back. And here's the part that really messes with people. You're not wasting money. You're just using it. You're paying for convenience, for comfort, for small upgrades that make life feel bearable. A little better food because you're tired. A slightly nicer place because you deserve it now. A few small treats because otherwise, what's the point? None of these decisions feel irresponsible in isolation. That's why this trap is so effective. It doesn't look like failure. It looks like adulthood. You're doing what everyone around you is doing, which makes it incredibly hard to see that something is off. And then there's comparison. You don't even seek it out. It just shows up. Someone your age seems ahead. They bought something big. They post moments that look relaxed, confident, settled. Meanwhile, you're calculating timing, waiting for the next paycheck to land before making plans, hoping the month behaves. So you push yourself harder. You think maybe the solution is more effort, more productivity, more grinding. But effort without direction just creates exhaustion. You end up tired and stuck. And the worst part, you feel ungrateful for even thinking this way. You tell yourself you should be thankful. You're not struggling like others. You have opportunities. So you minimize your discomfort. You ignore the signal. But the signal doesn't go away. It shows up as anxiety around money conversations, as avoidance when checking balances, as a subtle dread when something breaks. It shows up when you realize you don't actually know how long you could survive without income. Most people avoid answering that question honestly because the answer scares them, not because it's catastrophic, but because it reveals how fragile things really are. And that fragility creates a strange contradiction. You're working constantly, yet you don't feel in control. You're earning, yet you don't feel ahead. You're doing everything society told you to do, and still feel behind. This is where people start making emotional decisions. They chase shortcuts. They jump into things they don't understand. They look for something dramatic to fix the problem. Or they do the opposite. They shut down. They accept that this is just how life feels. They normalize stress. They stop believing things can be different. And this is where the first 100,000 becomes relevant. Because before that point, money doesn't feel like a system. It feels like survival. You're reacting instead of building, responding instead of shaping. Every plan feels fragile because it is. You're operating without a buffer. So every expense feels personal. Every setback feels like a failure. Every delay feels discouraging. That's why advice sounds hollow at this stage. Just invest consistently. Just think long term. Just be patient. Patience is hard when your foundation is thin. Long-term thinking feels fake when short-term stress dominates your attention. And consistency is difficult when every month feels like a reset. This is the emotional reality nobody prepares you for. The early phase of building wealth feels like you're doing a lot for very little visible reward. And humans are not wired to enjoy that. We like feedback. We like progress we can see. We like reassurance that effort is working. But in the beginning, the feedback is almost non-existent. You save a little. It barely moves the needle. You invest a little. The balance barely changes. Sometimes it even goes down. So your brain starts questioning the point. Is this even worth it? Am I missing something? Why does this feel so slow? This is where most people drift back to what feels good now. Spending gives immediate relief. Saving gives delayed peace. And delayed peace is a hard sell when you're already tired. That's why this stage feels lonely. You can't really talk about it without sounding negative. You can't celebrate progress because it doesn't look like much. And you can't quit without admitting something uncomfortable. So you stay stuck in the middle. Busy, responsible, and quietly frustrated. This section matters because if you don't recognize this phase for what it is, you'll think something is wrong with you. There isn't. You're just at the hardest part of the curve. It's psychology, because most people don't fail financially due to lack of information. They fail because their instincts are working against them. Your brain is designed for survival, not accumulation. It's wired to prioritize what feels good now over what might matter later. But in modern life, that wiring creates problems. Money doesn't feel like a long-term tool. It feels like a pressure valve. When life feels heavy, spending becomes relief. When work feels draining, comfort feels earned. When progress feels invisible, reward feels justified. None of this is irrational. It's human. The issue is that wealth requires the opposite behavior. Wealth grows from patience, repetition, and delay. All things the brain resists by default. This is why people confuse income with progress. Income feels like winning because it's immediate. You did something, you got paid. Savings and investing don't give that feedback. They feel like loss at first. Money leaves your account. Your lifestyle doesn't change. Your effort doesn't feel rewarded. So emotionally, it registers as sacrifice, not progress. Now add social pressure to that equation. You don't live in isolation. You live in comparison. You see people enjoying things now. You see upgrades, experiences, visible markers of success. And your brain draws a simple conclusion. They're ahead. I'm behind. But that conclusion is usually wrong. Most visible success is funded by future income. It's borrowed confidence. From the outside, it looks like progress. From the inside, it's obligation. But your brain doesn't know that. It just knows you feel left out. So it nudges you toward matching the lifestyle instead of building the base. This is where most people get stuck in a loop. They earn more, so they allow themselves more. They allow themselves more, so their baseline rises. Their baseline rises, so saving feels painful again. It's not reckless. It's gradual. Another psychological trap is what feels normal. If everyone around you has payments, stress, and financial anxiety, then those things stop feeling like warning signs. They feel like adulthood. You normalize being stretched. You normalize carrying tension. You normalize depending entirely on the next paycheck. So instead of asking, is this working? You ask, how do I cope better? That's a dangerous shift, because coping keeps you functional, but it doesn't move you forward. Then there's the optimism bias. People assume future versions of themselves will handle things better. I'll save more when I earn more. I'll invest once things settle down. I'll get serious next year. But future you is just current you with more responsibilities. Life doesn't remove expenses. It adds them. So delay becomes default, and the cost of delay is invisible. If you overspend, you feel it immediately. If you delay investing, nothing seems to happen. No alert. No penalty notice, just time quietly passing. That's why delay feels safe. But it's not. It's expensive. Another reason the first 100 100,000 is so difficult to scale. In the beginning, your efforts are too small to feel meaningful. You save a few hundred. You invest a little. The returns are tiny. So your brain says this isn't working. But the problem isn't effectiveness. It's mass. Think of pushing a heavy object. At first, all your effort goes into overcoming resistance. Nothing moves. Then slowly, it starts to shift. And once it's moving, it requires far less force to keep going. Money behaves the same way. Before you reach critical mass, all progress feels forced. After that point, momentum starts helping you. But most people never push long enough to feel that shift. They stop right before it gets easier. There's also a misunderstanding of what discipline actually is. People think discipline means constantly saying no, white-knuckling decisions, fighting temptation every day. That's exhausting. Real discipline is structural. It's designing your life so good decisions happen automatically, so you don't have to argue with yourself every month. But to build that structure, you first need stability, and stability requires accumulation. Without a base, every choice feels high stakes, and high-stakes decisions drain willpower. That's why people fall off track. Not because they don't care, but because they're tired. Finally, there's fear. Saving money forces you to confront uncertainty. When you start building reserves, you become aware of how exposed you were. That awareness can be uncomfortable, so some people avoid it entirely. They stay busy. They stay distracted. They stay in motion, because motion feels like progress, even when it isn't. All of these forces push in the same direction. Spend now, delay later, normalize fragility. And none of this makes you bad with money. It makes you human in a system that benefits from short-term thinking. The first 100,000 isn't just a financial challenge. It's a psychological one. You're fighting instinct, culture, comparison, and impatience all at once. That's why most people fail here. Not because they couldn't do it, but because nobody explained what they were up against. Once you see this clearly, the frustration starts to make sense. And once it makes sense, you can stop blaming yourself and start changing the environment around your behavior. But understanding the psychology is only half the story, because there's a cost to staying stuck in this loop, and it's bigger than most people realize. Let's slow everything down for a moment, because if there's one thing this entire conversation has been pointing to, it's this. Money isn't actually the problem. The way most people are forced to relate to money is. When you're below your first real foundation, every decision feels fragile. Every expense feels personal. Every delay feels like failure. And living in that state for years changes you. You become cautious but not calm. Busy but not secure. Responsible but not free. That's why the first 100,000 matters so much. Not because it turns you into someone rich, but because it turns money from something that controls you into something you can finally work with . Before that point, you are doing all the heavy lifting. After that point, the system starts helping you. That shift is quiet. It doesn't come with applause. No one congratulates you. But internally, everything feels different. You stop panicking at small setbacks. You stop needing every month to go perfectly. You stop measuring your self-worth by what you can afford right now. You gain something far more valuable than lifestyle upgrades. You gain breathing room, and breathing room changes behavior. You make better decisions because you're not rushed. You say no more easily because you're not desperate. You think long-term because short-term survival is no longer the threat. That's the real payoff most people never experience. Not luxury, not status. Stability. And stability doesn't show up on social media. It shows up in quiet confidence, in better sleep, in knowing that a bad month won't derail your life. That's why so many people misunderstand wealth. They think it's about what money lets you buy. But real wealth is about what money lets you ignore . You can ignore bad deals. You can ignore pressure. You can ignore urgency. You're no longer forced to trade peace for convenience. The tragedy is that most people never get here. Not because it's impossible, but because the middle feels thankless. The years where progress is slow, where the numbers don't impress anyone, where you feel like you're doing more than everyone else and getting less. That's where people give up. They don't fail dramatically. They just stop prioritizing. They loosen discipline a little. They delay just this year. They tell themselves they'll restart later. And later quietly becomes never. But if you're listening to this, something is already different. You're not confused anymore. You can see the pattern. You understand why earning more didn't solve the problem. You understand why comfort kept resetting the baseline. You understand why patience felt unrewarded. And most importantly, you understand that the struggle wasn't meaningless. It was the hardest phase by design. The first 100,000 is heavy because it's carrying everything. Your discipline, your restraint. Once you cross that line, you don't become someone else. You become unstuck. Progress starts to layer on itself. Momentum replaces force. Consistency replaces motivation. And the question slowly changes. It stops being, will I ever feel okay financially? And becomes, what kind of life do I want to build now that I'm not constantly worried? That's a very different place to stand. So if you're early, if you're tired, if you're in the boring middle wondering if any of this is worth it, this is your reassurance. You're not behind. You're not broken. And you're not missing a secret. You're just doing the hardest part of the work first. Most people never do. And that's why most people never escape the cycle. The goal isn't perfection. It's persistence. Not excitement. Not speed. Just staying in the game long enough for the math to turn in your favor. Because once it does, the struggle you're in right now becomes the reason. Everything else feels easier later. The first 100,000 isn't the finish line. It's the moment you stop running uphill. And from there, the path finally starts to level out.